I call this meeting to order. This is the 97th meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance. Our orders of the day pursuant to Standing Order 81-5, Supplementary Estimates B 2012-2013, Votes 5B and 25B under Finance referred to the committee on Thursday, November 8, 2012. We have a number of officials here from the Department of Finance, and we are starting late, obviously, about half hour late. We appreciate the officials for their patience today. We did have a vote in the House, and so I'm recommending we go to 5 p.m. If we have further questions, we can decide what to do at that time. I understand, Ms. Harrison, you have an opening statement on behalf of all the officials, so I will ask you to do the opening statement. Sherry Harrison, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Services Branch, and after that we'll have questions from the members.
Thank you. Bon après-midi, Monsieur le Président. Je m'appelle Sherry.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Harrison. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for Corporate Services at the Department of Finance. With me today are officials to assist in answering your questions on the 2012-2013 Supplementary Estimates B for the Department of Finance. These supplementary estimates reflect an increase in departmental spending of $238.9 million. It is important to note that 230 relates to statutory items that have already been approved by Parliament through enabling legislation. These statutory items are displayed in Supplementary Estimates B for information purposes and will not be included in the appropriation bill.
Au titre des dépenses législatives prévues, les facteurs qui ont contribué à cette augmentation de 230 millions de dollars sont les suivants. Une diminution
In interest on unmatured debt to reflect revisions of forecasted interest rates by private sector economists, a $28 million decrease in other interest costs due to revision downward in the average long-term bond rate, a $13.5 million decrease in additional fiscal equalization to Nova Scotia, $2.9 million decrease in youth allowance recovery payments from Quebec, $22.3 million decrease in recoveries of alternative payments for standing programs, $733 million increase in payments to the province of Quebec regarding sales tax harmonization, and $679.7 million in additional fiscal equalization payments, total transfer protection to provinces related to the equalization program. New funding requirements for Vote 1 of $1.1 million consists of reprofiles from last year, including the 90 Elgin Crown Site redevelopment project of $179,000, Maintaining the strength of Canada's financial system, $588,000. Proceeds of crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing act litigation with the legal profession, $200,000. And Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Initiative, $179,000. These new requirements are entirely offset by funding available within Vote 1 due to savings identified as part of the Budget 2012 spending review. The new funding requirements of $9.9 million in Vote 5 grants and contributions is in support of the Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Initiative. A total of $1.4 million available within Vote 1 is being transferred to Vote 5 to offset these funding requirements, resulting in a net increase of $8.6 million in Vote 5. The $1.4 million consists of a $1.2 million reprofile of tax policy GST technical issues funding to next year, as well as $191,000 for savings identified as part of the Budget 2012 spending review. Maintenant, nous serons heureuses de répondre à toutes les questions que vous pourriez avoir au sujet.
And now we would be pleased to answer any questions that you might have concerning these supplementary estimates. Thank you for your presentation.
There's questions with Ms. Nash for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the officials for being with us here this afternoon in place of the minister. And my question is really of a more general nature, and I'm wondering how would it be possible for us to get more disaggregated data and more timely information to help us with our decision making. When we're asked to vote on estimates or budget implementation acts without having all of the details on cost, it makes it very difficult for us to do this, and that's really what we've been doing so far. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how we can improve the system to make more timely information available to us in a more accessible manner.
I am familiar with the recent study on the estimates process. There were a number of recommendations that I believe will address some of the issues you've raised with regards to the timing and release of information, particularly with respect to supplementary information being made available in an electronic format on the websites and such. And as officials, we're available to the committee to respond to questions. But clearly the timing of the budget process and the estimates process is a cyclical one that is a challenge to follow the flow of new funding requests into the various organizations.
Mm-hmm. I guess because this data would probably would exist. The question is, how do we get that in an accessible format, in a timely enough manner for us to be able to do our jobs better?
A number of the Department of Finance statutory items that are being reflected in the estimates are bringing the estimates up to date for information that was made available through the tabling of the budget. So that's information that's already been out in the domain. With respect to the operating costs, we can respond to additional information. We've got some. There's other tables on the Treasury Board website that refer to it by standard object and such.
Mm-hmm. And yet the Parliamentary Budget Officer was forced to take the government to court to be able to get some of the information that he's been asking for. So I guess, it's difficult for us to be able to ask detailed questions when we don't have this information available to us. And there's been some best practices proposed by the OECD on budgeting processes, and it would help improve transparency. And I'm wondering if the department has been reviewing the whole issue of transparency in order to improve the accountability of the budget process.
Do you want to speak to can you speak to the budget process? I know the estimates process, I believe Treasury Board Secretariat officials met with committee to talk about the estimates process.
I'm not sure if there's a particular OECD recommendation you have in mind in terms of best practice, but the Government of Canada is an active member in OECD and is always looking at recommendations and best practices to improve transparency in the flow of information. A number of years ago, we moved from a cash budget to an accrual budget, which is considered to be best practice. In the spring of 2009, we introduced a new estimates to the cycle, a spring supplementary estimate that was intended to better align Parliament's voting on cash appropriations to budget measures that were introduced in a February or March budget. There were also a number of central votes that were created that were intended to introduce more transparency in terms, for instance, of how departments were using their operating budgets. So not only to make that clearer in the estimates, but also because of a spring supplementary estimates to get that into the hands of departments earlier in the fiscal year so that they could actually use the authorities available to them.
My time is up. Maybe I'll get a chance later to ask again.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. McLeod, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for waiting while we attended to the votes. I just had a couple of fairly straightforward questions, I think. One of the new funding requirements in Vote 1 is related to the proceeds of crime, the money laundering and terrorist financing litigation. Can you explain what the purpose of the spending was?
The $0.2 million is a row profile of funding from last fiscal year to the current fiscal year. The funding will be used to support the Department's ongoing litigation with the Federation of Law Societies of Canada to defend the constitutionality of the legislation.
Okay. And my other question, roughly $700 million of the statutory items in Subs B is related to total transfer protection payments to various provinces. Can you speak to that program, what it does, and who is it benefiting?
Want to speak to that, Chantal?
Yes. On total transfer protection, these payments are calculated and provided to provinces to prevent any decline in their major fiscal transfer. So the sum of equalization, Canada Health Transfer, Canada Social Transfer, and if they receive any protection before. So for 2012-13, we protected to maintain the level that they had in the previous years. So the amount is almost $700 million, and it's divided among 4 provinces. There's $362 million for Quebec, $13 million for Nova Scotia, $102.8 million for New Brunswick, and $201 million for Manitoba. And this was enacted through the budget legislation, the Job Growth and Long-Term Prosperity in June.
And the $733 million to the province of Quebec, and it's related to the sales tax harmonization. Is that part of the lump sum piece then?
No, and someone else. No, it's not part of the total transfer protection.
In March of this year, the province of Quebec and the Government of Canada entered into a comprehensive integrated tax coordination agreement, what we refer to as a SITCA, whereby Quebec agrees to make a number of changes to the Quebec sales tax in order to harmonize it with the goods and services tax. And the government is committed to making payments over a period of time to Quebec. The $733 million is on implementation of the amended QST.
Okay, so the lump sums are in a different, they will be in a different place then in terms of the payments to Quebec.
Yep, they're under different statutory authorities.
Thank you.
Ms. McLeod, we will go to Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Honor to have you here.
On the horizontal items included in supplementary estimates, you have both supplementary A's and B's here. And I'm talking about advertising, funding related to government advertising programs. What you see here is $16 million allotted to finance. This, of course, would be to the Economic Action Plan ads, I'm assuming. There's a little bit here and there in the supplementary Bs. You've got heritage, obviously, because of the 1812 celebrations. But there was a report done for finance. I should say reports, both 2011 and 2012. 2011, July 18th, Harris Decima completed a report for Finance Canada on the effectiveness of the advertising. 84% of Canadians had not heard about the next phase of Canada's Economic Action Plan. Of the 13% of Canadians who heard it, 61% couldn't or wouldn't recall a single part of that plan. The total expenditures was $16 million. Now, Ipsos Reid, from this year alone, said more than two-thirds of Canadians never saw any advertising for Canada's Economic Action Plan. Of those who could remember the ads, 23% could remember the phrase Economic Action Plan. It's a lot of money for brand awareness that doesn't seem to be too aware when it comes to Economic Action Plan, the term itself, which apparently is at really the forefront of what this plan is all about. But the advertising from the evidence shows in 2011 and 2012, the numbers are the same for penetration, brand awareness. But the budget went from 8.7 to $16 million. Something doesn't seem to be right. It's not really working. When you look at this, and you realize from last year, I mean, that's a big sum. Most of it is gone to finance. Is that correct, for the Economic Action Plan?
We've received $16 million in the current fiscal year for EAP advertising. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, the supplementary Bs would just talk about things, well, natural resources. What would that be pertaining to?
I can't speak for the other departments that are listed for advertising. I can only speak on behalf of finance.
You're prepared to comment? Let us, I mean, do you believe this advertising is effective in any which way? How do you gauge effectiveness? Is that why we did the report, based on what Ipsos and the polling firms had to say?
Mr. Chair, could I have my colleague, Mr. Cata, come to the table to speak to advertising?
Thank you. What I would, I mean, as part of our advertising campaigns, we're required to focus test both the ads before they're to appear, and we're also mandated to evaluate the effectiveness of the campaign afterwards.
With who?
With we do it's like a general survey to sort of general population that in essence measures a little bit to your point, measures either the awareness or the effectiveness of the campaign. In terms of the pre-campaign testing, there's something we hear on a very, very consistent basis, is that participants in these evaluations want to hear about the government's plan, and of course it's related to the economic situation as we know it.
1 minute.
It's fragile. It's lots of uncertainty in the U.S. and Europe and so forth, and people are actually asking in the testing we do.
Do you have a precise comment about Harris Decima? In 2011 says that this is not working. 2012, Ipsos Reid says much the same.
Well, in the post-campaign research that we've done, we have what's called a recall rate, which is sort of people recalling seeing the ad. And the recall rate is 53%, which is slightly higher than the average of 49%.
53%. Who does that?
It's part of the research we do. It's like polling. It's like polling.
But the polling I have here says it's nowhere near 53%.
Well, I mean, that's
But
one
you paid
poll.
for this report, too.
I can't speak about these numbers, but in terms of the polling that
You
we
cannot
do-
speak about these numbers?
No, but I'm not aware of the specifics of this particular poll. What I can speak about is the polling that Finance has done as part of its advertising campaign.
The polls that I just mentioned are the polls that you paid for, the ones with very, very low recall rates.
Brief response.
Well, sorry about that. But what I mean here is that, generally speaking, our recall rates for the advertising campaigns at Finance has been slightly higher than the average of other government campaigns.
Okay. We'll have to move on. We may come back to that. Mr. Jean, please.
Mr. Chair, and Mr. Catt, on that note, do you have a background in marketing?
No, I have a background in communication, but I've been involved in advertising for quite some time.
And in fact, most marketing experts will tell you that there's such a campaign awareness as top-of-the-mind awareness. Are you familiar with that phrase?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that phrase mean to you in relation to marketing?
Essentially, that again, in terms of the testing that we do, there's sort of two things we test. One is what's called unaided recall, is that without prompting, we say to people, have you, do you remember seeing an ad on the Economic Action Plan, for instance, and then we see what the response is. Or, alternatively, we say, do you remember seeing an ad from the Government of Canada? And then this testing is generally done shortly after the campaign has been as run. So that, again, it's a way for us to measure the awareness and the effectiveness of the campaign.
And in fact, most large corporations that deal with top-of-the-mind awareness campaigns understand that you don't get immediate bang for your buck. It's to build a traditional brand that people have confidence in, such as Coca-Cola, General Electric, some of the more recognized brands. And I see you shaking your head in agreement with me. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And is that, in essence, what the Government of Canada, I have a background in marketing, and I saw the ads a lot, and it seemed to me that that was what they were trying to build, was that confidence in the brand itself and the confidence in the ongoing economic action plan. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. The main purpose of the advertising, again, I go back to the economic uncertainty that Canada is currently facing. So the main objective of the campaign is to raise the awareness of the Economic Action Plan, of the measures that the plan contains and the benefits that also the plan contains, and that Canadians can avail themselves of these benefits. So in essence, it's raising the awareness and also driving people, for instance, to the Economic Action Plan website, which includes information of all kinds on how to access, first of all, know what the Economic Action Plan is all about, and also for people to sort of know how to again, as I said, to avail themselves of the benefits.
And in fact, it sounds like it's working because Mr. Sims has obviously gone to the website itself, and it sounds like many of the Liberal Party has. So it seems like obviously the campaign is working. Now, does this also? I understand as well that, of course, one of the parts of the action plan, it appeared to me, was that the government wanted to get Canadians to feel confident in their government that they were actually doing something about this economic crisis in the world. Is that fair to say?
I go back to the point I made earlier. Again, our research shows, and it's been quite consistent on that front, that actually people are interested and want to know what the plan is, that they expect the government to have a plan, and they want to know the details. And again, particularly given the economic uncertainty, all the more reasons for Canadians to want information about what is the government's plan.
And in fact, we've heard testimony at this committee time and time again that Canadian corporations are saving up money because they're afraid of investing because of the economic climate in the world. So part of this plan, it would appear to me, seems to be not just to make sure that somebody's in control of the Canadian government and have confidence in what's going on, but also to encourage companies to invest because the government of Canada is directly involved. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I would say it's, at the end of the day, it's, from our perspective here at Finance, it is a multi-purpose campaign in the sense that it's a pretty high-level campaign that tries to sort of address, as you said, the confidence issue, tries to convey information about the action plan, about specific initiatives in the plan, and that, again, that Canadians can avail themselves of these programs and benefits.
And in fact, during your communication expertise and your training, you probably became aware of subliminal messaging. And in fact, many people that see ads don't really see them, but they go into your mind and they give you confidence in that particular product. Is that fair to say as well?
If that's what I would, again, from a finance perspective, what I would say is that our campaigns are fact-based. It is about what the plan is, what the purpose of the plan is, and what the programs and the benefits are.
And based on your research, it has been a success.
Based on our research, it has been effective.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jean. Mr. Caron, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous tous et toutes d'être ici parmi vous.
Thank you. To all of you, I would like to change the theme a little bit. I want to go back to the issue of debt. There are obviously different types of debts. There are debts in the market and debts outside of the market. And in the update that was presented in the supplementary B estimates, there is the unmatured debt and other interest. And I would like to know if there's been any change with respect to debt that has not been contracted in the market. Does that reflected in the supplementary estimates?
Estimates for the first time, the government is presenting its interest costs against debt in two separate ways. A separate statutory presentation of the interest on unmatured debt, which is the outstanding bonds and certificates of indebtedness that have not yet become due, and then a separate entry for other interest costs, which is the interest against our liabilities for public service pension plans and some trust and consolidated specified purpose accounts. So the total interest, as reflected in these estimates, is $27.7 billion, broken out into these two separate statutory entries, and that is a change from the main estimates of $1,194 million, and that change is driven by the changing forecast of interest rates, both short-term and long-term.
Pour répondre directement à ma question, alors, ce que vous me dites.
To answer my question, you're telling me that there is a new, in this new form, debt that is not market debt, for example, for pension debt has been accounted for, and if there were any changes, it would have been reflected here in the budget documents. That's what you're telling me? And can you tell me, I understand the difference between debt contracted in the market and non-market debt, but is there a significant difference in interest rates between the two? So debt in the market on the short, medium, and long term, and if we compare that to non-market debt?
Share with you is what we have in terms of the projection base for interest rates, both in the short term and the long term.
Pour la dette sur les marchés?
Oui.
In the markets, yes.
2012, our interest rate projection for short-term interest rates was 0.93%. And so that's for the T-bills. And for the 10-year bonds, it was 2.78%.
Donc entre 2,78 et 2,86.
With respect to the accounting for these, between 2.78 and between 2.96, and what rate is used for accounting for the non-market debt? What is used for accounting purposes? You don't use this, refer to the same interest rates for borrowing in the market and to account for a debt that is not a non-market debt.
Information we would have to
Non, parfait, je
check on that and get back
comprends.
to the committee.
That's fine. I understand. Another 30 seconds quickly to get back to my estimates, but in the parliamentary budget officer's desk, he said that the overall debt was overall interest was. When you look at a study of the sensitivity of interest rates, do you do that by looking only at market debt or also outside of market debt interest rates?
Projecting interest rates is the consensus of private sector economists, and this has been the basis of our projections for almost 20 years, I think going back to 1993, 1994. So quarterly, we survey private sector economists, leading private sector economists in the country, and take the consensus view of their forecasts and use that as the basis for our budgetary, our budget and our update projections. And in speaking to a previous question about best practice, in fact, that has been cited by IMF and OECD as a best practice in terms of transparency.
Okay.
So it's not based on internal Department of Finance numbers. It's based on a consensus.
Okay. Thank you. Merci. I have Monsieur May, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, d'accord. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, first of all, with respect to training and the fact that there was a lot of information missing, and it's clear it's difficult to make decisions. With respect to the process, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has requested information about programs, and I see in the report that there are 23 departments that did not reply or did not have, and that includes the Department of Finance. This is in the report on supplementary estimates B. Can you tell us why the Department of Finance has not provided this information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer?
A response with respect to our reductions in alignment with the government estimates process and the program activity information.
Pardon? Excusez-moi. Excusez. Parce qu'on parle en même temps.
We responded with respect to aligning our response with respect to the program activity architecture of the department, which supports the estimates process. And we're here today to respond to committee questions on the estimates.
D'accord. Si on vient d'abord alors au
If we get to a CRA, we can see that in the supplementary estimates that measures that were approved in 2011-2012 that will only be implemented in 2012-2013. Can you tell us what types of measures these are and why were they not implemented in the 2011-2012 fiscal year?
Behalf of another department, can't speak on behalf of the of CRA.
OK. Puis il y a personne.
And there's no one here who could speak on behalf of CRA? Okay.
It's supplementary estimates.
Parfait. J'aimerais aussi savoir par rapport justement.
I'd also like to know with respect to expenditures Mr. Simmons talked about $17 million for advertising. Could you tell us why was this figure chosen? Why does this figure appear here?
For the Department of Finance was part of supplementary estimates A. My colleague can speak to the campaigns.
Essentiellement,
Basically, the allocation of the funds is determined by Privy Council and ultimately the Cabinet, to the extent that the Cabinet will allocate funds that out of a central amount reserved for government advertising, and the Cabinet allocates this money according to the government's priorities. So what this means specifically for the Department of Finance is that once the Cabinet has made its decision, the Department of Finance, as my colleague has said, received the amount of $16 million for its advertising campaign this year. And what amount had initially been approved for this year's? As I said, it was $16 million. That's the amount that was allocated to the Department of Finance for this year, and this amount was to be used for advertising about Canada's Economic Action Plan. So could you tell us the overall amount? That's it. That's the overall amount, 16 million. That's a lot of money, where we're talking about cuts and cutting in services, and that we can see that there are service cuts, and we think that that's a lot of money to be spent on advertising.
Clarify as the chair, so for the Economic Action Plan, the spending was in supplementary estimates A. So there's no, with respect to the votes the committee will have to do today, we will not be asked to be voting on additional funds for that program. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
That's correct. Thank you. Okay, round, Ms. Glover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make some clarifications as well. And perhaps, Mr. Cata, you can help me. I've received a number of letters from constituents over the last several years, in fact, with regards to questions on how they might take advantage of tax credits that have been put in budgets, how they might take advantage of some of the measures to create jobs. As small business owners in particular, I've been contacted numerous times with regards to the hiring credit for small business, that kind of thing. Many of them, have absolutely no clue on how to access those things, and some are very appreciative of the advertising that's been done. Have you received any suggestions from opposition parties on how we might educate Canadians if we don't use advertising tools to educate Canadians on how they might benefit from these measures? Have you received any suggestions from opposition parties on how we might do that?
I haven't received any, no.
No, very good. So, and as Mr. Jean quite precisely indicated, you said 53% of Canadians indicate that they are familiar with,
or that at least they recalled seeing the Economic Action Plan ad that that the department produced.
Very good. So I think what I heard from Mr. Sims today is that he thinks we ought to have spent more money so that more people are aware. I certainly am glad that the advertising is helping Canadians, particularly those who are most vulnerable and those who are attempting to make sure that jobs are created. So I thank you for that. And if ever you do get some suggestions, I'm happy to work with the opposition parties in any way to make sure Canadians do have the opportunities that are available in the budgets. So I throw that out there to opposition members if ever they have any ideas on how to better do this. But in the meantime, the $16 million I think is well spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glover. I go Mr. Marston, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. A little sooner than I was expecting, but I'm ready. The question Ms. Glover's on already is one of the things, and you seem to be in the hot seat today, Mr. Cass, so we'll leave you there for a minute or two. First of all, I want to start by saying that all the officials who are here today are doing what they're directed to do by the government of the day, and it's appreciated the work you do. Because we're asking you kind of straightforward questions and maybe verging on political questions, don't take it personally because but I think Mr. Jean hit it dead on in his interventions with you when he talked about top-of-mind branding and how the Economic Action Plan helped brand the government. And the $16 million we heard about came from an order in council, and which, for those people at home who won't know, that's a direct order that comes from the government themselves. It hasn't gone through the House. It's their directive on what to do. So you folks were delivering, and the information that you've given back to us is the effectiveness, even though there was a little debate with Mr. Sims, the effectiveness of doing that was the effectiveness of branding the Conservatives. Now, it may be used in the sense of people talking about the Economic Action Plan, but I'll tell you, in my writing, people come to me asking, why are we spending that kind of money? I'm not making that accusation at you because you're doing as you're directed. But because it was raised again by sorry, Mr. Chair, I tend to get a little excited. So for all that, I just wanted to get to that point. Now, I've just received a note that Ms. Nash would like to split time with me, and I will always do what Ms. Nash asks.
About 3 minutes. So.
Okay, and I will not take advantage of that generous offer, but I will, in response, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Glover, our recommendation was that we add greater transparency to both the budgeting and the estimates process so that Canadians, through their parliamentarians and through the parliamentary budget officer, have the best information possible and the most thorough information possible in order to do our jobs. And with that, as I have the floor, I would like to introduce a motion on this subject, which is that the Standing Committee on Finance asks the Minister of Finance to release to the committee the information that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has requested on the cuts in his department, given that we have the finance officials here today.
Can you just read that one more time, and we'll take a note of that?
Yeah, the motion reads that the Standing Committee on Finance ask the Minister of Finance to release to the committee the information that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has requested on the cuts in his department.
Point of order?
Okay. Point of order, sorry, Ms. McClellan.
I was just, we are here talking about supplementary estimates B, so I would certainly welcome your decision in terms of if this is even an appropriate motion to bring forward at this time.
I mean, at first glance, this does not seem to be on the topic of the day. So I mean, we are dealing with supplementary estimates B. I'm not really sure. Maybe Ms. Nash, you want to speak to exactly how the motion relates to the business of the day? Because if it does relate to the business of the day, it's in order. But if it doesn't, it's not. Mm-hmm. So I'm not seeing on first glance how it relates to the estimates before us today.
Mm-hmm. Well, it relates to the business of the day, because if we don't have the information from the budget process about how the government intends to spend money, it's difficult for us to determine whether these estimates are in keeping with the specific budget plans of the government. So given that we have the finance officials here today, and given that it is the Finance Department, which is crucially important to providing accurate information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer for him to be able to do his job. I thought it was, in fact, in order that we ask them to provide the information that the Parliamentary Budget Officer is looking for.
Okay, well, unless I'm getting advice to the contrary, but the orders of the DARE pursuant to Standing Order 81-5, Supplementary Estimates B, 2012-2013, votes 5B and 25B under Finance, referred to the committee on Thursday, November 8th, 2012. I don't see how this motion refers to either one of those votes. So that's my problem with this motion. Ms. Glover, you want to speak to this?
I just want to help my colleague across the way. The Finance Department has actually already complied with the requests from the PBO, and much of the information was, in fact, put on the website. So, and I'm in agreement with you, Chair. I don't even see this topic on any of these pages, so it's a bit of a stretch. But as I say, it's already been complied with. It's on the website. You can check that.
Okay, well, Ms. Nash on that point, then.
Well, it's the parliamentary budget officer has already gone to court, and I understand that finance is one of the ministries that had not supplied information to him. I didn't, before attending this meeting, I didn't check the finance website before attending, but I understand that this was one of the ministries that the PBO has gone to court over, which is why I'm raising it here.
Okay, well, I am going to take it as a notice of motion, so we will deal with it at our next meeting, because I don't see how it relates to the two votes before us today. So, okay. And I think it's probably something the committee would want to have a fulsome debate on. And, I mean, you're free to ask the officials questions on the topic, as they've answered today, but the answers they've given today are is that the department has complied with it.
Okay. I mean, if because of the court action, the minister has now complied, that would be, I'll certainly check that out, but I'm not aware of that, so that would give us time to verify that.
Okay. So we'll deal with it at our next scheduled meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have on the list, do I have Ms. Glover for a 5-minute round, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really want to continue this misleading conversation about the PBO because it is misleading. In fact, the PBO has stated very clearly that he's actually pulled back on his original intent. So, but nevertheless, we're here on the estimates. And so given that the opposition insisted on hearing about the estimates, I'm going to open the floor up to Ms. Harrison, who has graciously given her time to us. And one of the questions that hasn't come up yet is an explanation on the debt. I know Mr. Caron actually talked about the unmatured debt numbers, and so I'm going to open the mic up to you, Ms. Harrison. If you want to explain exactly what that line means, the interest on the unmatured debt, and why there's a difference there. We touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure that everyone understands exactly what that is before we leave here today.
Thank you for the question. I'll refer my colleague, Mr. Pagan, to respond.
There are two entries in supplementary estimates B related to interest costs. The first is interest on unmatured debt, with a total estimate to date of $18.5 or $18.6 billion, and then a separate entry just a few lines below on other interest costs. The presentation of our interest costs in this way, separated in this way, responds to recommendations of the Auditor General and are being presented in these supplementary estimates in this way for the first time. So it reflects, at the recommendation of the Auditor General, better information, more transparency in terms of the component elements of our interest costs. So on unmatured debt, this is the interest cost of outstanding bonds and certificates of indebtedness. There's a debt management strategy that is presented as part of the budget that is designed within the Department of Finance in collaboration with the Bank of Canada that meets a number of different objectives. First and foremost, servicing our government operations, but also responding to both domestic and global needs in the debt market in terms of the various maturities, durations of different offerings. So what we're seeing here in the estimates, in supplementary estimates B, reflects a decrease in the private sector forecast for interest rates from 1.3% at the time of the budget to something like 0.93% right now, and this is in keeping again with developments globally in Europe, United States, Canada that have seen those interest rates decrease.
And I appreciate you doing that because I wanted to make sure that the Canadians who are listening hear that it's a decrease in interest because there has been a change. There aren't many changes in the SUPs with regards to the finance department, so that is one that I would have thought, would have been a subject of some more scrutinizing or questions here at committee. So I want to make sure that people who are listening understand it's a decrease because of the projections made by economists in the private sector, and it does reflect what Mr. Katta said about outside pressures that we face with regards to Europe, with regards to the United States, and other challenges outside our borders. So I appreciate you going through that and allowing us to understand how these revisions get made and by what means they're actually made and who has influence over whether they do get affected. So thank you for that. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Glover. Ms. Nash, then.
Just another question, I guess on the same subject as Ms. Glover, in terms of interest rates and obviously global factors play a role, but I also notice recent analyses that say the reductions in government spending also plays a part in the softening of our domestic growth and therefore impacts the interest rates that the bank recommends. So the fact that the austerity measures domestically mean that that government spending, which is of course a large part of our economy, governments at all levels, that has been moderating, and that has an impact on GDP. It was something that the Parliamentary Budget Officer raised earlier this year, and the Bankers Association also raised it in their presentation to the Finance Committee. So I'm just wondering what your take is on that.
Very complex area. I think to start, it's perhaps important to remind the committee that the government, through Budget 2013, through Canada's Economic Action Plan 2013, adopted what I think outside observers consider to be a very balanced approach in terms of austerity or consolidation versus the ongoing need to continue to provide support for the Canadian economy. The consolidation, the austerity that was announced in Budget 2013 amounted to, as I recall, something in the order of $5.2 billion against a program base, total estimates of $270 billion. So it was a relatively small percentage of overall spending, precisely for the reason you cited. If reductions are too onerous, too sudden or significant, they can have negative impacts not only on the provision of services but on underlying growth in the economy. At the same time, part of what drives interest rates is that bundle of outstanding debt, and we're seeing that play out now in Europe. If debt gets too large, becomes unmanageable, interest rates go north, they increase, and it becomes...
But that's not the issue here in Canada.
It is not, I would argue, because of the measures that the government this government and previous governments have taken to manage our debt down, to put us on a downward track in terms of debt to GDP and underlying the underlying size of the debt. And so, if the question is what component of our interest rates is driven by the size of the debt versus the size of program reductions, I'm afraid I can't answer that. I don't know if anyone can, but suffice it to say that it is driven by a number of different factors, one of which is the overall size of debt as a proportion of the economy, and that's something that this government is mindful of and wants to ensure is managed in such a way that our servicing our debt does not become a problem, and therefore drive up interest costs the way we've seen both in other countries and in this country in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just had a couple of quick, and just following up on Ms. Nash's comments. Mr. Pagan, if Canadians and parliamentarians want more information with respect to unmatured debt and more information about that, we have the debt management report, debt management strategies. Is this? Would you recommend this in terms of sort of amplifying what you're telling the committee here today in terms of providing more information on that?
Yes, there's a chapter, and first of all, I stand corrected. I said budget 2013. That's what we are beginning to work on now. The minister was out consulting on this. Of course, this was budget 2012.
You haven't written it yet.
In budget 2012, there's a chapter devoted to our debt management strategy.
Okay, and my final point is, you sort of went through some of the changes that the Finance Department has made with respect to the estimates. If you could actually supply those to me as the chair, I will ensure all the members get that. In a letter form would be helpful. And I have Mr. Sims, if I have no other conservatives. So, Mr. Sims.
How much time do I have? Okay, just very quickly, just on the points that were made earlier, I feel like a little bit of retribution. To Mr. Jean's point, talked about I do go to the website quite often. The reason why I'm driven there is by constituents who have no idea about this plan. Let me just bring up one fact that I regret, I remiss I didn't bring up earlier. According to this is from April 2nd, 2012, Ipsos Reid. 92.1% of the people surveyed did nothing as a result of seeing the ad. Of the 7.9% people who did do something seeing the ad, only 22.6% of them went to the website. I would suggest that, or I would humbly admit, like Ms. Glover said earlier about a lot of people calling her office. If these ads were more effective, less people would be calling her office because they wouldn't have to. So what I'm saying here is that, and I will take the bit of advice that you gave earlier about providing information or providing my own advice. Yes, that's right. Providing my own advice about how to communicate this. And I've never done that before, but I will. In the next round of consultations, I think direct mail is probably a better way to go doing this. And so I take your advice. Quick question, though.
Through the chair,
yes,
please.
her. Yes, my apologies. I'm interested how you brought together this. You gave it an acronym about the harmonization sales tax in Quebec. Sitka, yeah, that's it. Is this a new type of program? Is there a precedent for Sitka in other harmonization deals, like say where I come from, Atlantic Canada, or anything like that?
Mr. Chair, I'll have to ask one of my colleagues in tax to come to the table to speak to the details of the Sitkas.
Briefly, please.
Yeah, sorry. That's
Bumping up against time.
There you go.
Okay. Madame
Yeah, the
Buffet.
Sitka is the name of the agreement we've signed with all harmonized provinces, so 3, with now 4 in the Atlantic, because we just recently signed one with Prince Edward Island, Quebec, Ontario, and we did sign one with British Columbia, but the province is in the process of exiting. No. There's no sales tax in Alberta.
Well, you should go to the website.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, we are at 5 p.m., and that's the end of this part of our meeting today. We will, colleagues, thank our officials for being here. Thank the officials in the Department of Finance very much for being with us here today. If there's anything further you wish the committee to consider with respect to the estimates on these two votes, please submit it to myself, and I will ensure all members get it. But thank you for being with us. Colleagues, I will suspend, and we will go in camera for the second part of our meeting.